Okay, hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel, and today we'll be going through part 3 of my unseen poetry lesson. So if you haven't checked out my part 1 and part 2 yet, make sure to hop onto that one first, and you'd be able to find a link to part 1 and part 2 at the bottom of this YouTube video in the description section below. At the same time, as usual, here is my email address, and if you'd like to purchase my literature in English notes for the DSC students, please make sure that you're emailing me on this email address. And also, here is my Instagram handle, so make sure that you're commenting to let me know how you felt about the video and if you need any other further support for your examination. So in the last two sections, in the first video, we've looked at step 1, where we had to read the poem and sort of understand the poem to be able to better understand. In step 2, we generally focus on the theme and the general message of the poem, but to make sure that you're getting a holistic sort of understanding on these steps, make sure to look at the previous parts before you look at this part 3 video. I will not be going through part 1 and part 2 for now because I've created 2 separate videos on that, so make sure you're checking them out first. Now we will be moving on to part 3 in this video. I'd be using a red color so that it's a bit more distinctive and you'd be able to see what exactly I'm writing. So we'd be going through part 3 in this lesson, and the general idea is interpretation. So if you've been focusing very well and attentively in step 1 and step 2, which is part 1 and part 2 of my videos for this particular lesson, you'd be able to know that after understanding step 1, you somehow understand the poem, and which is why in step 3 we're aiming to understand the methods used, which is technically the form, the structure of the poem, the tone, the style of the writer's poetry as well, and we will be analyzing their effects at the same time. So in 3.1, you always have to think of why. So here is the question word. You always have to imagine the question marks and think why. So why has the writer chosen this particular technique? So even before you get to step 3.1, you somehow need to familiarize yourself with the poetic techniques so that you're well equipped with the techniques, and which will help you to understand why the writer has chosen a particular technique. So in order to be able to understand why, usually it will come in 2 different steps, which is first of all reading the poem, and step 2 is of course understanding the poetic techniques. So these are 2 ways which will make you sort of understand why a writer has chosen to use a particular technique in their poem. And then 3.2 is to see how is the message sort of coming out and sort of exemplifying with that particular poetic technique. So you need to see how is it reinforced with the help of that poetic technique in the poem. Also, you need to, when you're thinking of step 3.1, you need to see how it contributes to the theme. Okay, you've got to think about why in that particular location, right? And then you have to somehow think, okay, how is it guiding my emotions? Okay, so when you think about your own personal emotions, it's generally thinking about the audience's emotions. So this is something that will help you to bring out 3.3, which is the idea of the effects of the audience. It will make you understand how is it creating an effect on the reader, whether it's positive, whether it's negative, how does it make you understand the theme of the poem. So I would say all in all, all of these steps are like correlated. So 3.1, 3.2, and 3.3 are very well linked and correlated to one another. So when you sort of understand one step, you're sort of making one step forward to understand the second step. Okay, so if that makes sense, for example, let's say we're all going to start off with the first step, which is thinking why. When you sort of understand the poetic technique, when you understand why the writer has written that in that particular location, you're also answering the question of how it contributes to the theme and how it contributes to the audience. So this is why I've linked them up all into step 3, because even though they're all different 3 sub steps, they're sort of still linking up to the one particular idea, which is interpretation. So when you're sort of answering these 3 questions, these 3 sub steps, you're somehow answering the bigger question, which is the interpretation. And this generally means that you will get more points in your essay, because you will have more content and also more organization, because you're thinking it in a more logical sort of manner. So it's very important that you're somehow understanding the 3 sub steps, which is thinking why, how is the poetic technique bringing out the message, and what is the effect on the audience. So moving on, I've sort of written 3.4, 3.5, and 3.6 on a different slide, because I want to highlight that this is not correlated and these are all individual steps, which is still part of step 3, but this is something that needs to be done more individually. So if you look at 3.1, 3.2, and 3.3, this is something that is apologies. So this is something that will like come on in a sort of correlation. So when you think of one sub-step, it will lead you on to step 3.2 and 3.3. But then when you're doing step 3.4, 3.5, and 3.6, these are all individual steps and it does not link with one another. But then all in all, it's still giving you the bigger idea of interpretation of a particular poem. So in 3.4, you need to understand the structure and the form of the poem. Now, if you are reading your poetry for the first time, and if this is your first step towards poetry, I'd highly suggest you to read Poem in October, which is a great poem that will sort of give you a better idea of form. I think it will be a good stepping stone to see how a writer can sort of use the form to depict the overall theme of the poem. So when you're sort of understanding the structure of the poem, you need to see how is the poem organized, and is the poem sort of giving you like a progression. If it gives you a progression, you need to see how is the progression contributed with the help of the structure of the poem. You need to see if the ideas are being progressed throughout the different stanzas, and to see if there's a change in the setting throughout the poem. So structure and forms are 2 different things. Now structure is generally the idea of how many lines are there in a particular poem. So let's say there's like 4 lines in all of the poem, that will be known as quartets. Okay, form of the poem is like how are the poems arranged, like how is the lines arranged. That is known as indentation. So for example, if I'm talking about, let's say, paragraph 1, so if this is my line, if it starts from here and ends here, maybe the second line starts from here and ends here. The third line starts from here and ends here. So you have to wonder, why is the form in this specific way? You need to wonder the reasons for this. Now, sometimes there's no reason. It could be simply that the writer is just trying to maybe engage the audience, making your eyes move back and forth, but most of the time there will be a message behind this. 3.5 is generally the idea of language. So language generally means that is it like archaic? Is it colloquial? So colloquial is like more daily sort of use of language. Now, how will you understand if it's colloquial? Usually they'll have like quotes. It's mostly more like informal. So it will, instead of writing give me, it would be like gimme, or it could be instead of thank you, they could say thank and then the Q sign, you know? And also, archaic will be more like Shakespearean language, or it could be like language used in the olden days, which people are not usually familiar with. And then also, you have to think about the language. Is it descriptive? Is it narrative? Is it modern day? Is it something that's more explanatory? Is it progressive? Is it active? Is it dynamic? Or is it just static? You need to think why. Why is the language used in this particular way, and how does this suggest about the speaker, the characters of the poem? And lastly, 3.6 is whenever you're sort of trying to do like your essay, make sure you're giving in personal opinions, personal information. Not personal information, actually it's more like personal opinions, to name it. So you need to think, why is the different techniques being used? Why are they being used? What is its overall effect? How do they enforce this message and this meaning? How can they create this particular tone and mood? And what can you do to further interpret the meaning? And what does it reveal about the theme? So in this particular step 3, I've given you like a very exhaustive list of like basically a checklist that you can use that will be very useful for your essay. And I think that's very important because it somehow gives you a direction in which you're supposed to think in when you're in your exam room. So the ones highlighted in blue is more like independent steps, and this is not correlated to one another. But then the ones highlighted in orange or red is basically the ones that is correlated to one another. So I really hope this part has helped you in sort of better understanding your essay. If you've got any questions, you can always comment below in the YouTube section below, and don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and click in the bell icon. At the same time, I will be pasting the link for part 2 and part 1 below this YouTube video, so make sure to check it out and watch the next part of this lesson, which will be coming out really soon as well. And do let me know how you felt about this video. If there is any other lessons that you want me to create, do make sure to let me know as well. So that's it for today. I hope you've enjoyed it. So yeah, that's it. Have a nice day.